tells today, this particular parable, it has a message that would be unsettling to those of us who like to have complete control of our lives. Or to those of us who like to look at the world and think that we can see good and evil just as simply as we can see black and white. Jesus' story today is about yet another strange farmer. Last week, we heard about a farmer who sowed his seeds all over the place, regardless of the fact of whether that environment would be good for the seeds to grow. This week's farmer has an infestation of weeds among his crop, wheat. Now, gardeners in our room here, what would you usually do if you had weeds in your garden? Pull them out. You would pull them out. That's right. My mother, who's a very good gardener, by the way, she pulls the weeds out, she throws them on the driveway so that they bake in the sun and will die. And that way, when she puts them on her compost pile, they won't re-root and grow in her compost. Well, this farmer in our story today does not pull out the weeds. This farmer decides on a different tactic. What does this farmer decide to do? Let them grow. And why? Why does the farmer decide to let them grow? If you pull the weeds out, the farmer says, you'll damage the wheat. Interesting. Well, as we know, the story that Jesus is telling is about more than just farmers and weeds and wheat. And luckily, for the last time, we'll get to hear an explanation from Jesus. So Jesus tells his disciples, after telling the story to the crowds, that the farmer is actually the Son of Man. Now, who is the Son of Man? Jesus, that's right. It's another name for Jesus. And the reapers, or the workers on the field, that they're angels. And we find out that the weeds are children of the evil one. And the wheat are children of the kingdom. And the enemy who sowed the weeds, who planted the weeds in the field, who's the enemy? Satan, the devil. And the harvest time is the end of the age. Now, what does that mean, the end of the age? Some confused looks I see. The end of the age is another word for the end of time, right? Which some people understand to be the end of the world, when everything comes to conclusion. Or you could also understand it to be the end of your life, the end of time for us individually. In either case, at the end, God sorts out the weeds and the wheat. So, who are we in this tale? The wheat, right? I like to think of myself as wheat. A good seed, a child of God in the kingdom of God. Right? Yeah. So then, who are the weeds? Right? That's the next logical question. But I want to ask another question first. When you have weeds in your garden and you pull them out, why? Why do you pull weeds out? What do? They overtake the garden, they destroy. So they actually steal water and nutrients from the plants that you want to grow. Sometimes they'll even grow taller than the plants, and they'll shade them so that they can't get sunlight to get food from the sun. And so you'll pull the weeds out so that your plants will get enough nutrients. And some weeds are really tricky, and they wrap around the plants and they choke them. I wonder, can you think of any people in your life who choke the joy and the energy and the life out of you? Any people maybe in your workplace or in your neighborhood or at school? Teachers! Allie was ready to tell us. So I'm sure you can all think of someone, right? And isn't it so tempting to think that if you could just pull that person out of your life, or maybe if they just didn't even exist at all, if they were just eliminated from the earth, how much more pleasant things would be, right? But here's the problem with that line of thinking. That person, whoever they are, with their weed-like behavior, they have a family, right? Parents, might even have a spouse and children, siblings, people who love them, people who maybe even depend upon them. And if you were to pull them out, you would hurt all those people. And they might not be weed-like at all. This is exactly what Jesus is talking about. When you pull out the weeds, you end up harming wheat as well. We see this all the time in the news, don't we? When there's conflicts or wars or violence, that some kind of tactic is implemented, and it's meant to harm just the people who are causing difficulty, the weeds, right? But inevitably, bystanders, women, children, end up getting hurt, even killed. You can't pull out the weeds without harming the wheat. You could even talk about this in the world of charity. We have our guests here from Quakertown Community Outreach who work with people that were in need in our communities, especially people who are in need of housing or in danger of homelessness. And you probably get people who take advantage of the resources that you offer, people that you might think of as needs. And if you were to determine your behavior based on those couple of people who take advantage of the resources, you would end up being less giving, right? Less generous, less compassionate, and it would impact the people who really need your services and who really want you to live a better life. So we can't treat people, we can't let the weeds inform our behavior. Instead, we are called to coexist with the weeds, right? It's tricky, hard work. You have to make compromises, you have to draw healthy boundaries, and yet continue to reach out. And do we see a lot of example of this in the leaders of our nation, in our government? Not really. Not really. It's so much easier to pull out those weeds. And yet, this story, it tells us that the kingdom of this world, the people that we see on the news, they're not the ones who inform who we are and how we act. Because we belong to the heavenly kingdom, right? We're the children of the heavenly kingdom. And so Jesus and his behavior and his life inform how we act and our behavior. And so we're called to do that hard, tricky work of coexisting with people who are truly annoying and who suck the life out of us. We're called to compromise. We're called to make boundaries. And we're called to continue to work together. And so I pray that all of you will be fed today and that you'll receive strength to do this hard, tricky work in the world.